Summer is right around the corner, and around this time of year, people usually get a little bit desperate to lose weight. Therefore, I figured the most appropriate topic for today's video would be the hottest peptides on the market right now regarding weight loss. And no, that's not Ozempic, it's not Mounjaro, it's not Wegovy, it's actually Retatrutide. And today we're going to cover this specific one that is still not FDA approved. We're going to cover this more in depth in the video. You're going to learn what Retatrutide exactly is, what makes it different from other weight loss peptides on the market, why is it still not FDA approved, what is the current state of scientific research, are there any human trials regarding Retatrutide, and why it is generally not the smartest idea to order peptides of Discord or from influencers on TikTok, Instagram, etc. A very important disclaimer before I get into the video. I am not a medical professional. This is not medical advice. I am a nutritionist and a food chemist, but none of this is actually a medical degree. Therefore, this video is only for educational and informational purposes. For most of you, when you hear peptides, you probably associate them with those illegal injectables you see everywhere on the internet. But peptides is actually a much larger group of compounds. They are essentially short chains of amino acids. Yes, the amino acids that are building blocks of protein, and they act as chemical messengers in your body. Their main goal is to instruct your cells, your body essentially, to do specific things, whether that would be hormone regulation, appetite control, or even tissue repair, other things related to inflammation, basically anything that you can think of. There is an endless list of examples of peptides naturally occurring in your body, starting off with collagen, for example. This is the building block of your skin. You also have the hormones insulin and glucagon, which are important for blood sugar regulation. Oxytocin, the neurotransmitter that is released when humans bond socially, this is also a peptide. On the market, you can find certain engineered peptides that are supposed to activate specific receptors to trigger specific pathways. And here, very good examples would be the weight loss peptides. We have semaglutide, Ozempic, and also tirzepatide, which is Mounjaro. They differ in the amount of receptors that they trigger in your body. Semaglutides or Ozempic are just GLP-1 agonists, so they target just the GLP-1 receptors in your body. Mounjaro, which is a tirzepatide, those are dual receptor agonists, and they target two receptors, GLP-1 receptors and also GIP receptors. I'm going to be going over those receptors in a second, just hold on for a little bit more. Retatrutide, which is the hot topic of the past couple of years, it is the first triple receptor agonist, so it targets GLP-1, GIP, and also glucagon receptors. A very important note, more receptors does not automatically mean that it works better, but I believe this is going to get more and more clear as clinical trials progress, and also if it is indeed FDA approved, we're going to get more and more information as people actually start adopting it, at least legally. I know a lot of people are using it now anyways. We're gonna go over each receptor individually, starting off with the GLP-1 receptors that you know very well if you've watched my video on Ozempic that I did in the previous year. Glucagon-like peptide 1, this is a peptide hormone that is released primarily from the L cells in your small intestine. Its main function is to boost your satiety, slow down gastric emptying, which would also lead to slower absorption of carbohydrates and also a flatter glucose curve. Additionally, it supports postprandial insulin release, so the insulin release after you have consumed a meal, and it blocks the release of glucagon that we're going to discuss in a couple minutes. It is also suspected that the stimulation of GLP-1 receptors might have a connection to the reward pathways in your brain, since there are also GLP-1 receptors in your central nervous system. There is also some anecdotal evidence, but not actual research, on how people who take GLP-1 agonists and at the same time have previously suffered from an alcohol abuse problem, how they also now experience no drive to continue with the alcohol consumption. The most obvious example for a GLP-1 agonist is Ozempic. It targets singularly this specific receptor. The second hormone that retatrutide mimics, whose receptors it targets, is GIP, which is also a peptide hormone that is released from your small intestine, primarily from the K cells. GIP works synergistically with GLP-1. This is why those receptors are also being targeted together. It also supports postprandial insulin release, so insulin release after a meal is consumed. What makes GIP different from GLP-1 is that it also impacts positively fat metabolism, lipid metabolism in your body. Mounjaro is a perfect example of a peptide that targets both the GIP and the GLP-1 receptors in the body. Now, finally, we move on to the new receptor that has not been targeted until now, and this is the glucagon receptor. Glucagon, as I already mentioned, this is a peptide hormone that is released in the alpha cells in your pancreas. If this sounds familiar, it is because in previous videos I've talked about how insulin is released in the beta cells in your pancreas. The best way to describe glucagon would be probably that it works contrary to insulin. If insulin is the hormone that works to lower your blood sugar after a meal, glucagon does the exact opposite. In times when you have not consumed a meal for a while and your blood sugar is low, it helps release sugar into your bloodstream so that now you have available energy. Here you might be asking yourself already the question, as I also did before reading the whole information through, why would you want to target glucagon receptors? I thought we were supposed to be lowering our blood sugar. Why would we want it to rise? Is that not completely counterintuitive? Well, the thing that glucagon is also involved in is release of glucose from your liver, from the hepatic tissue, the liver tissue. This way, glucose would not be stored there in the form of glycogen and also in the form of lipids. So this becomes very important for people who suffer from fatty liver disease. Glucagon helps keep this glucose as energy available for peripheral tissues in your body. And clinical trials done on humans until now also show that it is very effective in lowering the percentage of fat in the liver in people who were suffering from fatty liver. Very important note here, lifestyle modifications and also improvements in the diet, exercise regimen, all of those can also help with reversing the fatty liver. Fatty liver is reversible up to a point if it hasn't gotten that bad that you're now suffering from cirrhosis, but otherwise you don't necessarily need to be taking any type of medication to do something about it. But it would require a lot more discipline and consistency, and weight loss medications usually help a lot with the discipline part. Moving back to glucagon, it is also suggested to have an impact on your energy expenditure, on your metabolism. In some animal studies, glucagon receptors appear to be involved in the activity of the brown fatty tissue. This is different from your normal adipose tissue that you store when you eat too much carbohydrates or fats or energy in general. The brown fatty tissue aims to keep you warm, for example, when it is way too cold outside. And this specific one has a much higher energy expenditure than your normal white fatty tissue, which expends practically no energy. Since everything's been looking very positive until now regarding retatrutide, it's only natural that we move on to side effects and current state of scientific evidence section of the video. When we talk about side effects, the situation looks very similar, at least until now, as it is with the other weight loss medications. We have, again, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, bloating, all types of gastrointestinal issues, but I believe this is to be expected, especially since 2 out of the 3 receptors were already stimulated by the other weight loss medications. The pattern is quite similar. Those symptoms resolve in most of the patients, and if the dose is increased, it is likely that they might show up again until, again, the body adapts and they resolve after some time. When we're talking about the other side effects that now are starting to come up and that are the reason of multiple lawsuits against weight loss medications, I'm talking about gastroparesis, so stomach paralysis, and also about NION. This is technically this eye stroke, this permanent blindness in one eye that some people are suing Ozempic and Mounjaro for. About those two, we don't know anything yet, but since there was also no information available before Ozempic and Mounjaro entered the market, although those types of peptides have been researched for much longer than retatrutide, I believe that it is not excluded that those might show up again. Only time will tell, research will tell, the data will tell. We can't know that with the current evidence, unfortunately. There are some other interesting things that I came across. One concern is the increase in heart rate that is observed with retatrutide. Glucagon receptors are found in many different tissues in the body, and one of those tissues, one of those organs, is actually the human heart. In one of the clinical trials, I believe it was the phase 2 clinical trial on retatrutide, it was observed that in the middle of the trial, at the highest dosages, which are a lot more than what people usually administer to themselves, there was an increase of 9 beats per minute compared to at the beginning of the study. As time progressed and the study came to an end after like the 48 weeks, these 9 beats per minute were no longer 9 beats per minute. This effect had started going in the other direction, but it was still nowhere near the starting point. And this is what might be a concern for specific groups that would like to take the medication. Of course, for somebody with a healthy heart, those 9 beats per minute might not be anything crazy, but this could pose a problem for people with coronary artery disease or for people with some type of heart rhythm issues, arrhythmia or anything. There is also the possibility, of course, that the effects sort of cancel each other out. What do I mean by that? If somebody is obese, they usually have a pretty bad lipid profile. So they have pretty high LDL cholesterol, pretty high triglycerides, all of that. And those things are very important when we're talking about cardiovascular disease. In a lot of the cases, these people also have pretty high blood pressure, and if they just lost weight, their blood lipid profile would improve and their blood pressure might start coming down. So even if the heart rate was to be slightly increased, if there was less resistance, technically the impact would be again net positive. Those are, however, speculations on my side. This is not anything that has been proven, but I believe it is interesting to discuss these kinds of things. This is one of the reasons that I am excited to see what actually comes out in the next phase 3 clinical trials that are ongoing right now. And we have 3 trials. One of them includes, I believe, just overweight and obese people, but no other specific conditions. I mean, no diabetes or cardiovascular disease. There is also one more trial with people with diabetes, and also one more with people with some type of cardiovascular event history. And I believe especially the last one would be crucial for finding out more about the impact of retatrutide on the heart rate and heart health in general. One anecdotal side effect that I came across, this is not from research, this is just from comments on all kinds of social media platforms, is that some people do experience a lot of apathy, and this would tie to the reward system impact that I mentioned when talking about the GLP-1 receptors. Of course, if we're talking in the context of substance abuse, as we were with the GLP-1, that could be seen as something positive, but some people were describing losing interest in things that they usually enjoy, and a general feeling of emptiness and not being moved by anything. And this is not something that we strive towards. This area is actually not explored yet at all for any of the weight loss medications, so it would be interesting to see how this specific field evolves. Last but not least, we have the same concerns that we have with weight loss medications that are not directly tied to the medication, but more as to how do people administer the medication and what do they do together with taking the medication. I'm talking about muscle loss, I'm talking about bone density loss, all of those things like Ozempic phase, of course. This is all due to the rapid weight loss, due to people not consuming far from enough energy or enough nutrients, and all of these things tie together to losing weight pretty quickly because you're in a very large energy deficit. This is not something that one should strive towards, since it would mean losing a pretty good amount of lean mass, which is very important for maintaining a healthy metabolism, for longevity as well, for preventing the yo-yo effects and just gaining the weight back and maybe even more if you come off the medication. Regarding bone density, this does not happen overnight, but if you're not consuming enough energy and especially enough nutrients, it is only natural that your bones over time could prematurely deteriorate, and unfortunately people do not care a lot about this when they're 20, but they're going to care about this when they are in their 60s and they trip and fall and lose their independence for maybe half a year in the best case possible. Let's say you don't care about losing muscle or losing bone. Eating far from enough energy and nutrients for longer periods of time would also mean hair loss, brittle nails, and your skin not looking very glassy and moisturized and nourished. So maybe those things could motivate you to nourish yourself properly. Now let's move into the last aspect of the video, which I believe is probably the most critical, and this is not tied directly to retatrutide, but more to the peptide market online in general. Why is FDA approval important? Why is the legalization after all of these clinical trials and everything actually important for you as an end consumer of the products? An FDA approval would mean that manufacturers, pharmaceutical companies can produce this and sell this to the end consumer legally. And this would mean having to adhere to very high purity standards, quality standards, hygiene standards, so that no contamination occurs, so that the product is safe for use for the people that inject it. Right now, companies produce peptides of such very high standards for clinical trials that involve humans, such as the ones that are ongoing right now. And everything else that you as an end consumer can readily purchase online is not these products. You are buying most of the time chemicals that are for research purposes only. And this generally means that companies are going kind of around the law so that they can still make money, and they are selling you the peptides, but they label it this way so that it's not illegal, since it's technically not approved for use by humans. This, however, does not mean that all of the quality standards are actually being taken into account. And there are a lot of different risks that come with purchasing research chemicals that are not intended for human use. The most obvious would be contamination, so that there's something else present in the vial that should not be there. There might be the incorrect concentration, both too high or too low. Neither of that is good. And last but not least, the peptide that you ordered might not even be present in the vial. It gets only worse if you go down the rabbit hole and figure out how do people actually get these peptides. Some of the times it is from Discord chats, as I observed in one interview on YouTube that I was watching. And I was laughing at Americans, sorry for my USA audience, for ordering their peptides off Discord, until I discovered that in Bulgaria we also have influencers who are essentially dealers on TikTok and sell Retatrutide in particular. And this specific one that I came across that is pretty popular and people actually do indeed order from her, I was really baffled by this whole situation. Of course, there is no medical background and she is just, I don't know, getting them from somewhere and sending them to people and prescribing. She can prescribe because substance is not legal, and she's also has no medical or generally any STEM degree of any kind, or I believe any degree, to be honest. And all of this is very crazy to me, that people would go and purchase that, and the clients are very happy because she prescribed them a very high dosage, and now they are bragging about not eating anything. Like, they're very happy that they feel no hunger at all, and how that's gonna end up. I know that we live in a capitalist society and people want to make money, but this is slowly getting dystopian, and I feel like I'm watching the substance in live action right in front of me. Going back to Retatrutide to conclude the video, if these phase 3 trials go well, they should be published by the end of the year, by the way. That does not automatically mean that they're going to get an FDA approval next year, but it might be one step closer in this direction. And I do believe that there would be more different peptides on the weight loss medication market in the near future, since it's a very rapidly growing market. I'm leaving the rest of the peptides for the future videos. Thank you very much for being here with me today. I hope that you enjoyed the content of today's video. If you did, do not forget to like and subscribe to the channel. I hope to be posting more frequently soon. I've been really slacking, busy with other things. Let me know down in the comments if there's a specific subject that you would like me to discuss in a future video. I do cover most of your suggestions and I thank you very much for those. Thank you again for being here with me today, and I'll see you in the next one.